The Lithuanian-Belarusian border is really heating up. Hello, welcome to Dangerous Policy, a channel aimed at intelligent people wanting to discuss important issues facing life and society. My name is Crispin, and today I'm going to report on the latest developments in the ever-spiraling tension between Belarus and Lithuania along its border. Over the past months, many things have happened to bring things to a crisis point. You've had the mass protests against Lukashenko's rule after the elections in March. You had the forcing down of a commercial airline, a Ryanair flight, to capture one dissident in Minsk. You had the Astravyets power plant, which I created a video about recently. It's right along the Lithuanian border. And one thing I didn't mention about this power plant, which has been discussed in the comments on that video, is the strategic implications of that. Let's say there was a conflict between Vilnius and Belarus. Well, Belarus could threaten to destroy that reactor, spreading radioactive material across the border into Lithuania, as a way of protecting itself from any crisis between Belarus, Russia, and the EU. So this is a potentially threatening move along the border. But the latest development is that over the past month, over 1,000 refugees from the Middle East have been flown into Belarus and then dumped on the Lithuanian border to cross into the EU. Now, to put that in perspective, in last year, Lithuania reported 81 irregular migrants for the whole year, and yet over 1,000 have crossed in the past few weeks. What's happening is that Belarus is deliberately importing asylum seekers from Turkey and other places, taking them to Minsk and then busing them off to the Lithuanian border to make them flood across to the EU. This is to throw sand in the eyes of the Lithuanian government, and is an extraordinary abuse of power. The Belarusian government is effectively just engaging in human trafficking for the sake of political leverage. Now, the Lithuanian government has responded by saying they're going to build a new barrier. They're going to build a wall, effectively, across the 700-kilometer range of border territory between Lithuania and Belarus. It is a border between the EU and the non-EU, so I would expect the European Union to step up and help with that regard as well, and an increased deployment of troops along that border as well to help police that crossing. This is a serious escalation of tension because you're going to create new barriers, you're going to build up military forces, you've got severe provocation from Belarus. And let's be clear about the nature of the Refugee Convention and how all this is supposed to work. The Belarusians are not going to desperate camps in the middle of refugee centers in the Middle East and collecting families and children in order to bring them to Europe to have a better life. No, they're just going and collecting whoever's there who wants to go for primarily economic reasons, perhaps even as a threat. A lot of Islamic terrorism has arrived in Europe via this method. We, of course, remember the mass migration after the Syria conflict with Angela Merkel in 2014, leading to terrorist attacks in Germany, in Paris, in Nice in France, in Manchester. So this is basically a way of increasing social instability, and something that the Belarusian government is exploiting because of the increased tensions between Lithuania and Belarus. And the Refugee Convention itself is meant to be the next safe harbour. So what happens is, let's say you are threatened by your government, or you're at risk of persecution or death or abuse of your human rights, and you escape that persecution. So let's say you're gay, for example, and you're in a country where homosexuality attracts the death penalty. Well, you should be fleeing for your life, particularly if there's a risk of you being outed. And then the next place that is safe, for where you will not be deported back to your home country, well, that's where you're supposed to stay. And then you apply for refugee status through the UN processes, and then a country will accept you as a permanent resident once you've legitimized your refugee claim. But what's happening instead is we're getting a waves of economic migrants from poorer countries traveling through 12 or 15 intermediate countries to get to the place that they would prefer to be. And that's where a lot of the migration is coming, for example, to the UK. They're not coming from Scotland. They're coming from the Middle East. They're traveling all through Europe. Then they're getting on a boat from Calais to Dover. They're getting into the UK that way. Australia has imposed extremely draconian measures to prevent people from traveling to Australia by boat and sending people immediately to offshore detention facilities to say, look, you cannot migrate to Australia that way. We will decide who comes to Australia as a refugee, and we will go to the relevant camps to collect them. People have criticised that in Australia, but one thing you can say is it's been super effective. We don't have a problem with people smuggling in Australia in the way that we do see it in many parts of the world. And Australia has a very high refugee intake overall. So just because we don't accept irregular boat arrivals through people smuggling operations doesn't mean that we don't collect refugees ourselves. We do have a high quota. We just go to the UN camps and we take their advice on who we should receive as refugees. What the Belarusian government is doing is totally inverted to that. They're exploiting the fact that EU is highly rigorous on human rights, has plenty of opportunity for people to claim asylum and take their residency under international laws and conventions, but they're bringing people who haven't been vetted as genuine refugees. They're taking people, they're possibly making a significant amount of money from it as well. As I said, they're actually acting like the people smugglers are when they come to Australia. The Belarusian government is effectively, potentially receiving a lot of money from people to be smuggled into the EU, which is being aided and abetted by the Belarusian government itself. It's an official human trafficking operation that the Lithuanian government is now having to contend with. And this is all happening because of, personal bitterness between the two countries. So I just want to draw attention to this because this is just continuing to escalate. And it started, as I said, in earnest back in March when the Lithuanian government accepted a lot of people who were being oppressed by the Belarusian government into their own borders. There is a government in exile that would be democratically elected in free and fair elections who are currently in Vilnius under Lithuanian government protection. Lukashenko is not happy about this. That's Lithuania living up to its human rights obligations to be the next safe point of harbour, but it is not Lithuania's responsibility to accept unlimited flow of migrants from the Middle East who just happen to be boated in by the Belarusian government and sent to the border to be sent across. So I totally understand the predicament that Lithuania is in. It's a deep, underhanded tactic, I think, from the Belarusian government to be doing this, and I fully support Lithuania's right to build a wall and protect its borders like I would for any other country. I will throw sand in the eyes of the Biden administration, though. They've said to the Cuban refugees that they shouldn't be coming to Florida. The United States is the next safe point of call for the anti-communists who are existing in Cuba at the moment, protesting against the Cuban government, the Castro regime, which has been in power since 1959. And the reason they're doing that is because a lot of the Cuban Floridans who have experienced communism tend to be very skeptical of communist policies, and they will often vote Republican. And so for that reason, the Biden administration is resisting calls to accept Cuban refugees because they're worried about the demographics in Florida. Now, that's just a side issue, but one that I would just throw in there. If you are the next safe point of call, you do have a responsibility to take refugees and people fleeing persecution. You do not have a responsibility to take unfettered numbers of human trafficked individuals done through official means in order to exploit the barrier between the EU and a foreign power. That's my view. Please leave your comments down below if you're interested in this topic. We do cover the issues in the Baltic quite a bit. So please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much. Goodbye.